Got a lens video for you today. I thought we'd take a look at the Tokina 70 to 200mm f4. Some of the technical details are up there on the screen, so do have a look through those if you want to. There isn't a lot of information on this lens, so I thought I would make this video just to give you a bit of an idea of what you can expect. I have time-stamped it so you can jump ahead to areas that interest you. This particular lens does have an ultrasonic motor, and that also means we have manual override all the time, so you can just turn that focus ring even if it's set to autofocus. This is about 1 kilogram in weight, so it's on the heavier side for an f4 lens of this class. The upside though is that the build quality is excellent. Most of the barrel is metal, and that includes the focus ring. It's just the middle section I think which is plastic. Tokina have gone with a green coating on this, and I'll show you the results of that later on. We've done some optical tests. There is a gasket around the mount, but there is no mention of any specific weather sealing, so that's really just for dust. Possibly it could stop some moisture getting in there. Two switches on the side, AF manual focus, and the VCM is the stabilizer. There is no setting for a panning on the stabilizer, and we don't have a focus limiter. It's a very smooth feel on the zoom, internal zoom of course, but it is a bit heavier than say a Nikon lens would be. That would tend to be a lighter touch. This is the included lens hood, which is quite deep, and that has a felt lining on the inside. I like that myself because it's quite smooth when you reverse it onto the lens, and I'll just click that into place. There's no rattles or looseness with this lens hood. Nice deep hood, but you'll probably want to use this quite a lot. Focus is quiet and it's fast, although you can hear it at either end, the stops. The stabilization system, you can sometimes hear that clunking into place, and occasionally it makes a sort of weird groaning sound. Onto some of the tests now. We'll take a look at the distortion. 70mm, bit of barrel distortion. This is almost straight at 135, touch of pin cushion, and a little bit stronger at 200mm. But a good result overall. That's relatively modest compared to some lenses. There is a bit of vignetting, though it is quite mild. It's sort of a gentle vignette, and it's a bit more obvious when you're at the 200mm setting. And that's pretty typical for lenses of this type. You usually see it at the telephoto end more than you do at the shorter end. I often don't even bother to correct it. I just leave it in place there. It's not something which tends to bother me that much. Do some quick practical resolution tests at 70mm in the middle, f4. Good resolution with that, nice and sharp. The contrast does pick up slightly when you stop the lens down. It's a similar story with the corners. There's a little boost of contrast when you stop it down. And of course the vignetting becomes milder, so it does brighten the corners up a bit. Once we go up to 135mm, we're going to the middle again. Same sort of situation with this. Little bit of a boost to contrast, and you'll find that with the corners, same thing again. You're going to get slight improvement stopping down, but not massive jumps with this lens. You'll notice it's very consistent. There's sort of minor improvements. But we'd do this Spanish fishing trawler for the 200mm test. Zoomed right in at f4. It's actually very good at 200mm. There's only a very slight improvement when you stop the lens down. You will see a bit more of an improvement in the corners when you stop down, although they are pretty decent even at f4. It does pick up slightly in terms of the fine details when you stop down to f8. I did do a few more tests at 200mm at different distances just to see what was going on, and you can see here that there is a bit more fine detail at f8 compared to f4, but it really isn't what I would say a significant jump in performance. I would definitely recommend using the hood with this lens. You get a pretty dramatic drop in contrast. I have deliberately tried to make the flare as bad as I can, so this is a worst case scenario. The lens design has 3 super low dispersion elements which should help to tame the chromatic aberration. There is a little bit, it's usually on the side, in the corners and the edges versus the middle of the frame. and I don't find it to be that bad myself. I've sort of zoomed in at 200% here just to show you. This is as bad as it gets. It's pretty easy to clean up. What I have seen though is it's a little bit more obvious at the 70mm mark. It does clean up a little bit stopping down, but it doesn't entirely go away. Here's a shot with a lot of reflections in the middle at 200mm. Most of the frame you're not going to see a problem at all. There's no purple fringing in that particular shot. One thing I did notice though is when you stop the lens down to the smaller apertures, the exposure is about half a stop extra. It's less obvious on the crop camera because obviously it's in the middle area. Don't really know why that is, but it does seem to be something with this particular lens. The VCM system, or the stabilizer, I think the official rating is around 3 stops. It works well enough from my experience. Most of the shots that I'll take at say 20th, 25th of a second at 200mm, they will be sharp. I normally switch it off if I'm using a faster shutter speed. There is some focus breathing with this lens, but it gets bigger rather than smaller when you are focusing at closer distances. My overall thoughts with the rendering and out of focus areas are I really don't see any problems at all with this lens. It does a very nice job. Very smooth backgrounds, even with a very busy background. I like the look of the images. There's no sort of hard lines or outlining. We'll go back to the harbour shot quickly just to show you at 200mm, and there's a lot of things going on in the background there, but it is smooth. There's no sort of weird contours or outlining. Close focus performance is quite good. You can get pretty close with this lens, and it's usable at f4. Slight improvement at f5.6, but it's certainly okay wide open. As with all optics, nothing is perfect. There are a couple of quirks with this lens, but personally I don't think that they're a big issue myself, and the reason for that is I just find that I like the look of the images. The focus is fast, or at least it's certainly been fast enough for the type of shooting I've been doing. Haven't had much chance to do landscape photography with this lens, but it's certainly a very popular focal length for that type of activity. Would have been nice to have had a focus limiter. That can be quite useful. This is a sort of staple lens for this type of shooting. More action shots, candid type photography. If you were doing things like weddings or events inside where there isn't fast action, f4 is probably fast enough with the stabilizer. You can debate if you need an f2.8. Are you shooting ice hockey inside? Every little bit of speed might count. Personally, I enjoy the fact that there is less weight to carry around. Though it's heavy for an f4, it's still a lot lighter than a 2.8, and you would notice that if you're using this all day. It's still possible to pick this up new in Europe. It's discontinued since about 2020, I believe. Once you start comparing it to the Nikon, which I think is also discontinued now, it's less than half the price. I had a quick look on MPB recently, and they had quite a few of these for just over €300, and that is a bargain for a stabilised f4 lens. Not sure why Tokina didn't make it on other mounts. Perhaps they thought it wasn't worthwhile with Canon. Canon have a lot of 70 to 200mm lenses. They didn't bother with A or K mount either. Hopefully that video was useful to you. If you've got any questions, do drop them down below in the comment section. Thank you for watching, and do stick around. I have a few more photo videos coming up.